The opening of the text delivers a powerful, poetic invocation that introduces the reader to the lost goddess, an archetype rich with spiritual complexity and symbolic resonance. She speaks in paradoxes, claiming identities that appear to contradict each other. She is both honored and despised, holy and profane, mother and daughter, visible and invisible. These oppositions are not intended to confuse but to illuminate the comprehensive nature of her symbolism. She represents not a linear character with a singular role but the full spectrum of the human experience and the divine journey. Her name varies, Sophia to the Greeks, Gnosis to others, and with each title, she reflects a different cultural lens through which divine wisdom is perceived and honored. The lost goddess stands as the mythological personification of divine wisdom fallen into forgetfulness. Her lostness signifies the collective spiritual amnesia of humanity, a fall from original union with the divine into the fragmented world of matter and illusion. This disconnection is not a permanent state but a chapter in a larger cycle of awakening. Her narrative calls the reader to engage in a personal and collective process of remembering. The archetype of the lost goddess thus functions as a mirror, urging the soul to recognize its divine origins and the possibility of reunion with the sacred source. This introduction is more than literary flair, it is a spiritual summons. It calls forth the intuitive, mythic intelligence that resides in each reader, bypassing rationalism and appealing to a deeper, more ancient knowing. The themes introduced here, fall, duality, memory, and reunion, will recur throughout the text, guiding the reader through a layered journey that is simultaneously philosophical, psychological, and mystical. In Gnostic tradition, myths are not mere relics of pre-rational thinking or simplistic moral fables. Instead, they are revered as encoded spiritual blueprints, archetypal narratives that hold layers of meaning meant to be revealed over time through contemplation, initiation, and personal experience. According to Plotinus and other mystical philosophers, myths serve a dual function. First, they operate as analogies, aiding initiates in the psychic or emotional stage of spiritual development. They meet the soul where it is, presenting profound truths in a symbolic language that speaks to the heart and imagination. Second, they evolve into vehicles for abstraction, allowing those in the pneumatic or spiritual phase to decode, transcend, and integrate these truths into direct spiritual awareness. Far from being static tales, myths are living organisms within the psyche. Their symbols and characters adapt to the life conditions of the listener or reader, offering new insights upon each encounter. A myth that once seemed fantastical may, with time, reveal itself as a profound psychological map or a mystical allegory. This unfolding is not imposed from without but arises organically from within, as the reader becomes more attuned to the mythic dimensions of their own inner world. Myths are also emotionally resonant in a way that abstract philosophy rarely achieves. While philosophical discourse often appeals to logic, myths move through feeling, image, and story. They activate memory and desire, grief and hope. They touch upon the deepest parts of our being, parts that rational thought alone cannot reach. When we hear of Sophia's fall and her plea for redemption, we are not merely absorbing information, we are feeling her pain, her longing, and her eventual joy. We see ourselves in her. Moreover, mythical figures like Sophia are not fictional characters, they are archetypal realities. Jung described archetypes as the psychological DNA of humanity, patterns of energy and meaning embedded in the collective unconscious. Sophia, as an archetype, lives within the soul of every individual, whether consciously acknowledged or not. To engage with her story is to awaken an ancient memory of who and what we truly are beneath the veils of personality and ego. The myth of Sophia stands as a sacred narrative of the soul's journey through the cycles of divine wholeness, separation, suffering, and ultimate reintegration. It begins with Sophia in her original state of union, a virgin soul dwelling in perfect harmony with her divine Father. This pre-fall condition symbolizes the soul's primordial unity with the source of all being. There is no conflict, no separation, only an undifferentiated oneness that precedes form, time, and individual identity. But Sophia, in her desire to create or to know, turns away from this unity. Her movement into the material realm marks the beginning of the descent, a descent not merely into physicality but into fragmentation, multiplicity, and illusion. She becomes entangled in experiences that reflect the human condition: betrayal, violation, longing, addiction to false lovers who promise fulfillment but leave her empty. These lovers are symbolic stand-ins for the ego, the passions, and the external identities that the soul clings to in its forgetfulness. Her suffering is not simply punishment for a transgression, it is the necessary condition for awakening. In the depths of her despair, she begins to remember. She experiences metanoia, a change not just of mind but of heart and orientation. She cries out to the divine, not in the language of doctrine but in the raw, aching voice of the soul that longs to go home. Her Father hears her, and the promise is made: her divine consort, her twin flame, her brother-lover Christ will come to meet her, heal her, and bring her back to herself. The narrative of Sophia is a grand allegory, encompassing the psychological and spiritual evolution of every individual. She is not a static deity but a living mirror of our interior world. Her dual nature, higher and lower, eternal and fallen, echoes our own. We, too, are simultaneously divine and human, awake and asleep, complete and broken. Her journey is our journey. Her story gives sacred language to the ineffable drama unfolding within each one of us. Sophia's myth maps with striking precision onto the fourfold schema of Gnostic spiritual development: the hylic, psychic, pneumatic, and Gnostic stages. These stages represent not arbitrary categories but developmental thresholds that every soul must cross in the process of awakening. The hylic stage corresponds to total identification with the material world. It is the soul's immersion in form, sensation, and ego. Here, the divine spark is dormant, buried beneath layers of conditioning and desire. Sophia's fall into prostitution, her abuse at the hands of false lovers, and her eventual abandonment symbolize this stage. She is at the mercy of external forces, unable to perceive her own value or origins. The psychic stage begins when the soul experiences the first stirrings of remembrance. There is an inner disturbance, a sense that something essential has been forgotten. Sophia's cry for help, her purification, and her ritual preparations represent this phase. It is a time of repentance, reflection, and initial healing. The soul begins to turn inward, questioning its assumptions and seeking a deeper truth. The pneumatic stage is characterized by deep spiritual longing and refinement. The soul is no longer asleep, but it is not yet fully awake. It awaits the arrival of the divine bridegroom, the moment of direct encounter with the higher self. This stage is marked by vigilance, inner discipline, and faith. Sophia's dreams of her lover, her anxiety at not recognizing him, and her preparation of the bridal chamber all signify the soul's readiness for transformation. The Gnostic stage is the culmination, the mystical marriage. Here, the soul and spirit become one. The knower and the known dissolve into a singular awareness. This is not mere intellectual understanding but a direct, lived experience of oneness. In this state, the soul is no longer seeking. It has arrived. It remembers itself as divine, eternal, and whole. The mystical marriage is the sacred consummation of the entire journey, a return to the source, enriched by the wisdom gained through descent. The myth of Sophia is not an isolated invention of early Gnostic Christianity but a brilliant synthesis of symbolic themes and archetypes inherited from earlier religious and mythological traditions. Her narrative draws deeply from both Jewish and Greco-Roman sources, weaving together a transcultural tapestry of spiritual longing, descent, and restoration. These ancient traditions provided the building blocks for the Gnostic expression of the soul's journey, offering language, imagery, and metaphors that allowed Sophia's myth to speak universally across time and geography. From the Hebrew scriptures come depictions of Israel as a fallen woman, a once faithful bride who becomes wayward and adulterous. Prophetic voices like Jeremiah and Ezekiel speak in visceral terms of infidelity and abandonment, casting the soul or the collective people as figures who have turned away from the divine covenant. These narratives echo in Sophia's fall into the hands of unworthy lovers and her eventual call for reunion with the divine. Similarly, the story of Eve in Genesis, as the soul separated from Adam, representing consciousness, offers a foundational image of the psyche's fall into identification with the senses and the body. The expulsion from Eden becomes a metaphor for the soul's estrangement from its origin. In Greek mythology, parallels are abundant and deeply resonant. The tale of Persephone, abducted into the underworld by Hades, reflects Sophia's descent into incarnation and her cyclical return, a motif mirrored in the soul's journey through birth, suffering, and remembrance. The myth of Helen of Troy, whose real self remains hidden while her image is taken away, speaks to the dual nature of the soul, its essence untouched while its reflection becomes entangled in illusion. Psyche's union with Eros in the myth of Eros and Psyche encapsulates the salvific role of divine love in awakening the soul. Egyptian religion, too, feeds into the story. The goddess Isis, both queen and mourning mother, seeking the dismembered body of her lover Osiris, prefigures Sophia's grieving and redemptive role. Her descent into the profane world, her secret knowledge, and her capacity to restore life all align her closely with Sophia. The motifs of sacred marriage, loss, and resurrection traverse these cultures, forming a perennial pattern that Gnostic Christianity refines and redeploys. Sophia's myth therefore stands at a spiritual crossroads. She is not bound by any single tradition but arises from the collective reservoir of ancient human wisdom. In her story, the Gnostics unified the symbolic vocabulary of East and West, scripture and myth, psyche and cosmos. Through this synthesis, they were able to communicate timeless truths about the soul, truth veiled in symbol but revealed through inner experience. Within the New Testament Gospels, the myth of Sophia is not overtly stated, yet it operates as a hidden subtext, particularly when one reads the narratives allegorically rather than literally. Jesus' encounters with women, his role as bridegroom, and the repeated use of feminine symbols all suggest that the Sophia myth was encoded within the structure of the Christian story. Mary the Virgin and Mary Magdalene form a symbolic dyad, representing the two aspects of Sophia, the incorruptible, divine soul and the fallen, embodied soul. The Virgin signifies unbroken connection to the divine, while Mary Magdalene, the repentant prostitute, the woman from whom 7 demons were cast out, represents the fallen soul that is undergoing transformation. Her close relationship with Jesus, portrayed with intimacy and tenderness, speaks not just of personal affection but of mystical union. Key gospel episodes parallel Sophia's narrative. The Samaritan woman at the well, who engages in theological dialogue with Jesus and receives the promise of living water, echoes the soul encountering divine wisdom after many failed worldly attachments. The woman caught in adultery, whose life Jesus spares, represents the psyche caught in shame and judgment, now liberated by grace. Martha and Mary, one active, the other contemplative, embody 2 spiritual paths, with Mary, the contemplative, being affirmed as having chosen the better part. Most poignantly, it is Mary Magdalene who remains at the tomb, weeping for Jesus, and who becomes the first to witness the resurrection. Her recognition of the risen Christ and her reception of his teaching parallels the moment in Sophia's myth where the soul is finally rejoined with its divine counterpart. In Gnostic texts such as the Gospel of Mary and the Gospel of Philip, Mary Magdalene is depicted not as a mere follower but as the disciple who truly understands, Sophia reborn, bearing the hidden teachings of the resurrected Christ. This reinterpretation invites readers to see the Jesus story not solely as a historical account but as a mystical allegory of the soul's inner drama. Jesus represents the divine consciousness that descends into the world to awaken Sophia, the soul sleeping in matter. Their reunion is not a romantic fable, but the symbolic restoration of cosmic harmony within the individual. The climax of the Sophia myth and the heart of Gnostic spirituality is the concept of the mystical marriage. This sacred union symbolizes the ultimate reintegration of the separated aspects of being, the soul and spirit, the human and divine, the individual and the universal. Unlike literal marriage, the mystical marriage is not a social institution but an inner spiritual event, a moment of illumination in which the soul realizes its true nature in unity with divine consciousness. Throughout the Gnostic and early Christian literature, this theme recurs with profound symbolic depth. The bridal chamber is a key image, a sacred inner space where duality dissolves. Jesus frequently refers to himself as the bridegroom, and his parables, especially those involving wedding feasts, can be read as invitations to this sacred union. The wise virgins who keep oil in their lamps represent the prepared soul, vigilant and illuminated, ready to enter the inner marriage when the divine arrives. The Eucharist, as practiced by early Gnostic communities, also encoded the mystical marriage. The bread and wine symbolized the union of body and spirit, matter and light. In some traditions, the feminine aspect, sometimes personified as Mary or the goddess, was honored as co-celebrant in this sacred rite, reinforcing the message that Gnosis requires both divine aspects in balance. The mystical marriage is also reflected in dreams, visions, and mystical experiences. It is the moment when the soul no longer sees the divine as separate, but recognizes it as the very essence of its own being. In this union, the soul does not lose its individuality but becomes transparent to the light of consciousness. It becomes a vessel of the divine, an expression of the universal within the particular. This moment of union is the true resurrection. Just as Christ rises from the tomb, so too does the soul emerge from the deadness of ego and illusion. Sophia, in this consummation, returns not to her previous innocence, but to a mature wholeness, having known suffering and transcendence. The mystical marriage is the alchemical fusion of all polarities, heaven and earth, male and female, self and other. It is the heart of Gnostic enlightenment. Sophia's story is not just a side narrative to the Christian mythos, it is the key that unlocks its deepest mysteries. Her journey from divine unity, through fall and suffering, to redemption and mystical union, reflects the path of every soul. It transforms Christianity from a religion of external salvation into a mystical path of inner awakening. In the traditional telling, Jesus saves humanity through his death and resurrection. In the Gnostic retelling, Jesus comes to awaken Sophia, to remind the soul of its forgotten divinity and to show the way back to wholeness. This reinterpretation does not diminish Jesus' role, rather, it universalizes it. He becomes the indwelling Logos, the inner guide, the eternal presence that calls each soul to remembrance. Sophia, in turn, becomes the sacred feminine principle long obscured by patriarchal theology. She embodies the soul's longing, intuition, receptivity, and capacity for transformation. Her restoration to centrality offers a more balanced vision of the divine, one in which the feminine is neither excluded nor subordinate, but essential and co-equal. Together, Sophia and Christ represent the dual poles of the self, soul and spirit, immanence and transcendence. Their reunion is the model for our own inner healing. It is the mystical marriage that lies at the heart of every genuine spiritual tradition. In embracing Sophia, the seeker embraces the fullness of their humanity and divinity. The myth of the lost goddess continues to speak to modern spiritual seekers because it addresses the universal themes of alienation, desire, awakening, and return. It teaches that enlightenment is not an escape from the world but a return to the self, a homecoming to what we have always been, yet forgotten. Through Sophia, we remember. Through her, we rise. Through her, we are made whole again.